Hi there everybody, and welcome again to my channel. Hope you're enjoying yourself, and please feel free to watch the videos of the previous episodes. On today's episode we're going to talk about the AGGR function, and we're going to cover it. Probably we will not be able to finish everything that there is to cover with this episode, so we will do it also in the next episode. But wherever you are free, please press the follow button, subscribe if you want, and I promise we will have more content in the weeks to come. So without further ado, Without further ado, let's start with the AGGR function. The AGGR function is a special function in Qlik sense, in Qlik world. It's not, although the name, it's not an aggregation function, but it is a function that has some connection with aggregation, and we will talk about it in the minutes to come. This is the syntax from the manual, from the Qlik manual of the AGGR function. In this episode and the next one we will cover everything that is written here. Probably the more advanced topics of the structure parameters and the distinct and not distinct, we'll have to wait for the next week. So let's see some uses for the function and what can be done about it, with it, sorry. So we have some kind of company, we have sales, we have customers, and I just put up some tables on the canvas, the layout. Right now I'm showing the total sales per customer, total sales per product, and total sales per customer and month year. As you remember from the last episode, the same formula is present in all three cases, and it is the sum of sales, but since it's a matter of context, in each formula, in each object, we get a different value. So what we want to do here, and how can we utilize the aggregate function? Basically, the aggregate function is a function that lets us calculate an aggregation, some kind of aggregation upon some dimension, and the result of the function is an array of values. Array of values that is correspondent with the values that are present in the dimension that we used in the function. And one of the main uses for the aggregation function is nested aggregation. Usually in Qlik we cannot nest aggregation. We cannot do sum of sales of sum of products or something like that. We can only aggregations, nest aggregations, when we use the aggregate function. So let's say, for example, we have here a table that shows the sales per customer, and here is a breakdown of the monthly sales per each customer. As you can see, each customer, if I sort it by customer, you can see that each customer is showing the number of times as it has months in each month, the sales in each month. What I want to do, I want to take this value from here and show it up here. I want to show for each customer which month was the top sales for each customer. So for this, I need actually to make something of a max value of sum of sales. But since this is an aggregation function, I cannot nest it. So I have to use the AGGR function. So let's see how it's done. Okay, we go inside edit mode, and I have prepared in advance. Let's go inside. And the syntax is very, very simple, actually. Let's break it down. What we have here, and usually when I break down formulas, I like to start from inside, not from the outside. But that depends on the case, but usually. So inside the formula, the main expression that I have here is actually the same formula that I had before, sum of sales. And I tell it to give me the sum of sales grouped by dimensions of customers and month year. Now, this syntax is actually the same as I have in this object down here on the right. The aggregate function actually mimics this table, and the output of the aggregation of the AGGR function is actually this list of values. Like I said, usually a function returns a single value. You give it one or more parameters or none, and it returns a single value. Aggregation functions are like that. They are the opposite. They take a few parameters, like a field name, and in the field name represents a number of values, and they return a single number. The aggregation function is different because it returns an array of functions, and we have to do something with this array. So what we're going to do with this array, we're going to take the max sales per customer per year month. Okay? Now, if I just come in here and I will add an expression here of max sales, I will get a different number. Okay? This is the max sale, the biggest sale for each customer in each month. And this is not what I want. What I want is actually for Qlik to take the values that are belonging to one customer. Let's enlarge this. Take the values that are belonging to one customer. Let's remove this so it won't bother us. And I want to take, for each customer, I want to know which month did he sell the most. So in this case, it was December 2006. It's actually year month, okay? Sorry. So I want actually for the chart to return for Alice Look software, I want to return the value of 458. And if I will select another customer, let's say Greenwald, the total sales for Greenwald is 92,555. So I want this here in one row. So this is actually what I'm doing here in this expression. This expression, the AGGR, separated. This expression actually makes Qlik create a temp table inside its memory that is exactly the same as the table that I've seen, that I showed you outside, this table. It creates this table and it calculates the number of elements that there is in this object, and it transfers it back to this object. Now, since in this object I have also dimension of customer, that means that for each row in this big table, what happens is that Qlik knows that this row should be of Alice Luskofter. So actually, it filters the entire array that is received from this temporary table in the memory only on alles flux software, and this is why I can get the values that are here. But I don't want all the values, I just want the max values. And this is why, if I go back to the formula, what I did here, I enclosed the entire AGGR expression inside a max value. And actually what I tell it is, take this expression, you get a list of values, a list of things, in this case sales values per customer per month, and return the max value. Now, if I was using this formula, let's say I take this formula, this expression, and let's add some kind of text, and I'll add the measure, and I will put this in here. What I'm getting is the max number. Currently I'm selected with one customer, so it returns the 458 value. But if I clear this selection, I get this number, which is the biggest number for all the customers for all the months. But since in here we are having a dimension of customer, and remember everything is context, so this formula, when I take it and I put it inside this object like this, and I've used the no show if column, show column if, to hide this column, and when I do this, I get, since this is the context of the object, it knows to consider the dimension value that is currently calculated in this row. Remember, I told you, when Qlik sense or Qlik comes to calculate an object, it's actually some kind of a for loop. For each value in the customer, calculate the formula. So it's kind of like selecting loose cofter and returns the max sales, the max amount of sales for the largest month. Okay? Here, since there is no dimension, it returns the largest for all the customers. So this is one way that I can actually return for each customer the biggest, the top month sales per customer. I can do the same for product. Let's go over here, and we have another formula, and it's the same formula, but this time the second dimension is product, not year month. And if I will enable this, you can see that I have the value here, and if I select Grünwald, I can see that the biggest sale was for the product halter dress. Okay, so this is one of the main uses for the aggregation function. Now, what if I wanted not to just list the total sales for the customer, the total sales of the biggest sale by product per customer, but I also want to add the name. I want to present which product is the product that was which product is the product that was that had the biggest sales for each customer. For this, I will use another aggregation function instead of max, and this function is called first sorted value. First sorted value is a function that takes a list of elements, a list of values inside a field, sorts them in a specific way that I can tell it, and returns the first one. Okay? I can reverse it and return the last one by changing the sort order. So let's see what I'm doing here. How can I sort the the list of values. What I want to do is I want to sort the list of products. Let's return to this object here on the left. I have here the list of products, the field product with the sales. And since nothing is currently selected, I have here all the products. Okay, and if I put it inside inside an object, I can double click the sum of sales and order the values of the products by the sum of sales. So I can see which one is the top. But how can I? So this is the value that I want actually the first sorted value to return to me. Okay, the default value, the default sort order of the first sorted value function is from small to big. So in this case, it will return this one. Now, how can I sort it? I want to sort it by this this list of values. Now, if you remember, I already had a way of obtaining this list of values. Remember, the aggregate function of sum of sales by product can return to me the order of the product by sales value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come here and I take the first sorted value. The first parameter of the first sorted value is the name of the field that I want to return. I want to return one of the values from the field product. The next parameter is the sort weight. How I'm going to sort the field of products, the values of products. And what I'm telling it here, I'm telling it exactly what I did in the chart. I'm telling it to take the sum of sales, to aggregate it by customer and product, and this produces a list of values, and I take these values and I tell it you're going to sort the product by this list of items. So because each value in this expression actually corresponds to one product value. Okay, I think I don't need to put it. Yes, I will explain later why I need to also to put the customer, because I have the customer inside the top object also as a dimension, so I need it also here. So what I'm telling it, take this list of values, sort it by numeric value, because this is the default, sort it by numeric value because these are all numbers, and for each corresponding number identify the product. And now, since you have the product sorted by the values of the sales, now you can tell me which is the first product. And since I said I want the last one because I want with the biggest number, I'm just putting a minus sign before the aggregation and I'm reversing the sort weight. So it actually sorts the values of product by sum of sales, but from the biggest number to the lowest number. And this way, the first sorted value, if I will allow it, I can see now that for each customer, it gives me the amount of sales of the top product and the name of the top product. And if I will select this customer, let's click OK, large it by the number, I can see that indeed Helter dress is the biggest selling product of the customer Greenwald. And let's say I'll select another customer, Chumps, and again I can see that the biggest number for this customer is $219, and indeed it gives me the Helter dress. And let's select a customer with a different product. Let's say Rastret. Yeah, and I can see that the top selling product is Summit hiking boots, and I can see that I got it here. So these are a few things that we can do. Let's make a selection, and this is one of the things we can do with with AGGR function. Let's recap. I used the AGGR function, and I said that the AGGR function actually corresponds to the same as an object that has dimensions and an expression. And what is returned by this function is the list of values of the expression. The syntax of the set analysis of the AGGR function allows only one expression. I can have multiple dimensions, but only one expression, because the array is a one-dimensional array. I get an array of values that are corresponding to the values that are calculated by the group by function of the AGGR. And this list of values, I can do something with it. What I can do with it, I can pass it to another aggregation function. And we saw two cases. The first one is we use the max value, the max function. We enclose the entire AGGR expression inside a max. So the max is returning the max value from the list of values that is returned by the AGGR function. And we did the same thing with a different aggregation function. First sorted value is also an aggregation function. Aggregation functions are functions that operate on one or more values. It can also operate on one value, but it usually operates on one or more values and returns a single element, a single item. It can be either a text or a number. In this case, it returns a text. So the first sorted value is running on a few values which are returned by the field product, and the sorted parameter of the first sorted value organize the field of values of product by the cell value, and this way I can tell the first sorted value, bring me the first one. So actually, like I said again, this thing creates a list of elements which is passed to the first sorted value, and the first sorted value is aggregating it and returns just a single element. In this case, it returns the name of the product that we want. We could have done the same thing with this formula and return the month, which had the biggest cell. Instead of using here product, we can use this and first sorted value of month year, and then I will get this number, which is not the name of a month, but since this is not a date, it's we can make it this. And we'll make it something like that. Okay. So if I will select this one, I can see May. This is strange. Should have returned May 2005 for this customer. Let's select another one. And it's stuck. Come on, don't get stuck on me. Ah, okay. I was with the scroll bar on the right, and I cannot select an expression. I can only select. Okay, I see something is wrong. It's probably what I did with the the date function. Let's just make it like this. No, something wrong with the calculation of the number, because this is a string and not a number, so it doesn't know how to treat it correctly. But it returns the correct number eventually. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. And in this case, we're going to use the aggregate function for something else. Let's talk about what we are seeing here. We have here the total sales and the total budget, and here we have the sales minus total budget. The difference between those, notice that I use the fabs function. Fabs is absolute. It ignores the sign. You will see in a minute why does it matter. Now, when we are using a table, we have something inside the table parameters that is called auto function, total function. Let's go to the formula, and if we come here, scroll down and into the properties of the formula, we can see we have something that is called total function, and the default is auto. And if I click it, I can see that I have a choice of some more functions. These are the most common aggregation function, and I will select the sum, and as you can see, what happened here is that the Qlik changed the number. This is not the same number again. So what is the difference? It looks like I'm diverting from the aggregate, but bear with me. We'll explain everything in a minute. And we will see how it's done. I'm just checking to see if there is anybody typing something in the chat. So far, nothing. Okay, so what does the total function actually do, and how can we utilize it? The default is auto, and if you remember, I was talking about context in the previous episode, and it's the same thing here. We have the same formula, sum of sales minus cost of goods. Okay, the same formula which is in each row is also inside the total. Okay, so as we know it, when Qlik Sense calculates the total, it actually ignores all the dimension. It calculates the same formula, but without the dimension. That means it takes the value of 13,321,288 and subtracts from it the budget of 11 million, and we get the 2 million value. And it's doing the same thing on all those lines here. But since I used the fabs function, some of these values are minus. Let's remove the fabs for 1 second. And if I will sort this now, I can see that I have at least one value which is minus. That means that when I did the fabs function, let's undo this. This value is no longer minus. Okay, you see this, there are other values. The smallest value is 0, where there is no difference between the budget and the sales. Sorry, it's not budget, it's costs. Let's change it. I tried this first with the buzzard, but it didn't. Cost of goods. Okay, so when Qlik Sense calculates the formula, it does the same thing like I said before. It goes here and it calculates this one minus this one, and it gets this number. But as you can see, if I again remove the fabs, the total number that we get here didn't change. How come? Because QlikSense did the same thing here, and it calculated the values here. But it didn't calculate the values, the total values of this element, of this array of values. It didn't take all the values that are inside here, minus 602, 38, 128, 129, and etc., etc. But it calculated the same formula on those two totals, and it gave it this number. Okay, let's return the fabs. But what if the more correct number is actually to sum all these values that are listed here? That means first let QlikSense calculate the values for each cell, and then I wanted the total to show the sum of values that are inside this row, not the result of the same expression on the totals of these two fields, these two expressions, but the sum of total of values for all the expression that you calculated for all the rows in the table. And this is exactly the difference that the total function allows me to do. If I press the sum, what happens now is that QlikSense actually doesn't calculate this value, the total value, based on these two values, but it sums up all the values in here and present me with the total of these values. Now, usually, those of you that comes from Excel, this is the difference between when you just do a sum of values, or you do a sum if. When you want to calculate each value inside each row in a certain way, and you want the total not to be calculated over all the records, but just to be the sum of all the rows. So in QlikView, this was called sum of rows versus expression total, which is what we have here. This is the auto is the default. It's the same as expression total. QlikSense calculates the expression for the total based on the same, on all the rows of data without considering the values of each dimension. When I use the sum totals function, it gives me an aggregation of all the values that are in here. Okay, but if you can see here, I have the same chart, but this time it's in a pivot table. And as you can see, this is the value of auto. So let's go and do the same thing inside the pivot table. But the problem is that there is no total functions in there is no total function in the pivot table. So what are we going to do? How are we going to solve it? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is AGGR. Promised you that we are still on the subject of AGGR. If you remember, the AGGR function actually does the same thing that we have here, but on a temporary table. It actually, if I will use the AGGR function with this expression and this dimension, what I will get is actually the list of values inside this column. I will not get the total expression of total sum of sales minus total sum of goods, but I will get a list of elements that is consisting of all the values that are present in this row, in this column. And we already know that we can take this list of values and apply another aggregation function to them. So we can take this expression and perform a summation of all the values and receive what we actually wanted, which is the sum of rows and not the total of expression. So actually what I can do is I will just copy this expression. Oops. Yeah? Copy this expression from here, and I will create a new expression. And this time I will just enclose this with an AGGR function, and I'm going to utilize all the dimensions that I have in the chart, which is in this case customer. Okay, so actually what I did here, I told Qlik make this calculation of sum of sales minus cost of goods per customer. So I get a list of elements that is corresponding with the number of customers that I have. And now, just take this list of values and sum them. I think that, and let's, this is very annoying that the auto format is not as we want it. And what we got here is actually the correct, or in this case I'm not so sure that this is correct because I kind of cheated with the fab cells, but usually there is a difference between sum of row and sum of sales. Most of the time the sum of the total expression is the correct one. This is why it's the default. But sometimes we want to sum the values of the rows, and in other cases, if you remember, the total functions in the table object, yes, it has only these aggregated functions. So instead of doing a sum of all the values in the list, I can go and do an average. So I want to present the average of all the rows in this object, or the max, or the min, etc., etc. But these are the only functions that are available to me: average, count, max, min, and sum. What if I want to do another function like concatenate or some statistical aggregation function? With the default total functions, I cannot do it. But if I utilize the AGGR way, I can easily change this function to be anything I want. This enclosing, it can be average, and I will get the average of the values. I can do the same here using the auto, but with the AGGR function, I can actually obtain all other aggregation functions that are not available via the total function in the table. Okay, so but let's try and understand how does it work. How is it doing the values in each row correctly? Now, as you remember, context. For each row, it's as if Qlik selects the value of the customer to show on this row. So when it comes to calculate the sum of sales minus cost of goods for Coal Industries AG, it actually is the same as having only the values that are belonging to coal industries, that are associated with coal industries. So this is why in this column it calculates without any sum of rows, because it calculates the expression total for this customer. 2,517 minus 2,389 gets 128. But when it comes to the total, it doesn't do it because it doesn't have any other dimension, no selection. So it actually sums the element list of all the values that are present here. So in each row, the function with the AGGR returns only one value. I know I said AGGR returns an array of values, but it is an array that can be consisting of only one value. So in this case, we get the sum of rows, or the average of rows, or the max of rows, or whatever AGGR function, aggregation function that we want to use, and we can do the same thing in the pivot table that we done in the regular table. And also, like I said, if we want to use another aggregation function, which is not one of the defaults that are supported inside the total functions, one of these, then we can also utilize the AGGR. We're going to do one more thing. Yes, I think we have some time for one more thing that we can do with the AGGR function. Okay, now, as I said, the AGGR function returns a list of elements, a list of values. Now, we can take this list of values and pass it on to another aggregation function, like sum or average, etc., etc. But there is another thing in Qlik that can handle a list of values. Okay? Anything comes to mind? What is a list of values in Qlik sense? Every field is the list of values in Qlik sense, right? And where do we use fields? We either use them in AGGR functions, aggregation functions, or we use them as dimensions. So what if I could take the list of elements that I calculated for from the function AGGR and use them in a calculated dimension, in a dimension? Okay? So the simple thing to do, let's take a filter pane. Okay? A filter pane takes a single field, let's say city, and lists everything that is in the field of city. Let's take another field, let's say sales, and we get a list of number. So the filter pane receives anything that is a list of elements. So why not pass it an AGGR function? So let's see what we have here. So we have here a table that counts number of products per customer. This is distinct. I use the distinct function here, the distinct keyword, to count how many different products is customer bought. Without the distinct, it can be much higher, because every item can be, in this case it's the same. It's the same, okay. But it can be actually more than that, but I want to use the distinct, so we will return the distinct. Sorry, like this, distinct product. So I have here an object that calculates the number of products sold per customer. And as you already know, I can use the same logic that I got here to obtain this list of elements. Anybody wants to guess? Exactly, I do AGGR, sum count of distinct products by customer. So let's write down this formula. We'll write it down here. AGGR, count distinct product by customer. Okay? So as we, customer needs to be, this is funny because this is not a legit field name, but QlikSense doesn't mind. I don't know why. Anyhow, we'll take this formula, this expression, and as we learned before, we can take this expression and use it somewhere else. In the previous example, we used it in a sum, in an aggregation function, sum, average, etc. What if we're going to take it I'm going to put it here instead of the sales. Okay? Now, it should be perfectly alright, because this is an object that knows how to deal with a list of elements, and I'm giving it a list of elements. So let's say apply, and if we can see that we have here the number of products sold, the same element list that we have here. Okay, and since this is a filter pane, each value is only represented once. So although we have a few customers that has only one product, that bought only one product, here it shows me only one value, only one value. So, but wait, what if I want to know for each number of products how many customers are attached to it? So first of all, since the AGGR function creates a temporary table in memory, this table still has the memory of the dimension that it used to calculate the list of value. If you remember, with the AGGR function, we take an expression and we tell QlikSense to make a temporary table with this expression according to a certain dimension. So if I go ahead and select the 1, you can see that it also selects only the customer that has bought one product. And if I will select the 4, I have only one customer that bought 4 products. But I don't want to go on and start pressing, selecting the number of products and see how many customers or who are the customers that bought them. What I want to do is give QlikSense to do the work for me. Okay? And I've done just that. Instead of taking this expression that we used here, okay, and use it in a filter pane, like I said, another place that I can use it is another place that is accepting a dimension. In this case, it's a table. Okay? So let's take this table and we have a dimension, and in this dimension we have this, the same formula. I will put it here so you can see that this is the same formula. AGGR of count distinct product by customer. Okay, so this is the same. I enclosed it with the num function to format it. The num function is a function that is not an AGGR function. It just takes a single parameter and returns a single parameter. It doesn't know how to operate on more than one value. Never mind, just a side note. So I had to format it because I don't have formatting options for numbers inside the dimension. So what I got here the same list of numbers, the same list of number of products sold that I have here. The same list, and I have it here also. What I added, like I said, I wanted to know how many customers are associated with each number of product bought. I want to know how many customers bought one product, how many customers bought 2, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So this is exactly what I did. I came here and I added another expression this time, and I just did that. I told it, count the customer. Count distinct number of customers that have bought each amount of products. And as you can see, I have here for each number of products sold, I have here the number of customers, and I can select it and see that indeed there are 2 customers. And if I select this one, I can see there is only 1. And if I go and select this one, I can see that there are 3, etc., etc., etc. And then okay, we have a few minutes more, so let's add another step to this. I can utilize this even further, because this, you know what, I will do it differently. Let's change this formula. Instead of number of product, we'll calculate sum of sales. Okay, so now I have an object that calculates for each customer the total sales for each customer. And I want to do the same thing. I want to take this list of values and use it as a dimension, and I actually want to see how many customers bought the same amount. So how many customers bought 630,534? Okay, bear with me, but as you can see, this list is much bigger. Okay, and the differences between the values are very small. Okay, so let's first do this. Okay, let's, instead of using the count inside the AGGR function, instead of using the count distinct product, I will use the sum of sales. Oops. One parenthesis too many. Okay, and now I got the same thing, but instead of the number of products each customer bought, I have how many customers bought in the amount that is specified. And as I can see, since the differences between them are very, very small, most of them only bought one. Okay, so there is only one customer that bought 1,431,752, which is kind of logical because each customer buys specific numbers. So what I want to do, I want to make some kind of grouping. I want to take this a big list of elements, and I want to make some borders, make buckets. Okay, and for this I have a special function. Let's make some room here. For this I have a special function. Everything is a function of functions. Okay, so like I said before, we can take the AGGR function and pass it on to something else. In this case, by the way, pay attention that in this time I didn't use an outside aggregation function, because if I will use an outside aggregation function here, it will return only one value, and I don't want one value, I want a list of values. So what I can do, as you can do, is use a function that is called class. The function class should be spelled correctly. The function class, again, takes a list of elements. I have to use a list of elements because this is what the result of the AGGR function is, a list of elements. So the class function takes a list of elements, usually numeric elements, and groups them into buckets. I tell it which is the expression. These are the parameters of the class function. I tell it which is the expression that is going to be used, and I tell it what is the width of the basket that I want. Okay, so usually let's look at the values that we have here. Values are between 0 and 1 million. So let's make a bucket of, let's say, 200,000. Let's group them in 200,000 groups. So I don't need this anymore. Class. This is the first parameter. Okay, now in this case I am using the class function with an AGGR function which returns a list of elements. But I could also have done is use the class function with a field, because the field is also a list of values. But in this case I want to group not the sales, I want to group the result of the sales per customer. Okay, so this is my first parameter. And the second parameter is, let's make it 100,000, and I close it. We will, in a different, maybe next episode, we'll try and explain a little bit more about the class function. But this is the result that I get from the class function. Okay, it actually takes 100,000. Okay, it takes the list of numbers that it was written here, all these separate values, and it groups them into groups of, in this case, $200,000. So we have all the sales that were from 0 to 100,000, all the sales from 100,000 to 200,000, 200,000 to 300,000, etc., etc., etc. And this time the list is much shorter. Okay, I have only about 10 or 15 values here, and this time I can see that most of my customers are buying very small amounts. Okay, more than 2/3 of the customers are buying anything in amounts of between 0 and 100,000, and the rest of the 30 are scattered among the other sales. And I can see I have only 2 customers that are selling more than 900. They are buying more than 900,000. So I can take this and let's duplicate it, and let's convert it into a bar chart. Done, and enlarge it, and here you can see the distribution of the customers by the amount of sales. Okay, there are ways to divide the values here dynamically. I can, for example, create a variable. Okay, let's create a variable, create new. We call it V round, V bucket, size, and we put here 150,000, create new, no, sorry, yeah, create new, here, close, and now we will come here. Let's do it here, it will be clearer. And instead of here writing this value, we will use $expansion, and we put the bucket size. Okay, and now I think we have in the visualization bundle, there is or maybe the dashboard bundle. Yes, variable input. Let's put the variable input on the canvas, and let's tell it that our value is bucket size, and done. And now you can see here that this is based on a different value, and I can come here and change the value and dynamically allow the user to change the width of the bucket. I think that we are going to finish today. There is plenty more to talk about the AGGR function. We haven't finished by far, and we haven't even touched the more advanced aspects of it. This is the basic, and we will talk about it in our next episode next week. I will upload this. I know I promised and I didn't yet. I'm going to open a YouTube channel, and I'm going to put all the videos from here onto the YouTube channel also. So if you cannot log into Twitch, you will be able to see them on YouTube. I appreciate if you follow. I appreciate if you press like, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please, if you have anything to say, anything to tell me, send me an email or put something in the chat, or if you know me, send me something into the WhatsApp group. What I wanted to know is maybe the time that I'm broadcasting is not suiting everybody. I will gladly change it. Let's say Thursday at 2 a.m. or whatever, or Friday morning, whatever you want. Send me an email and I will try and accommodate it. And meanwhile, drive safe. Have a nice time.